I can't wait to dive into this conversation because, your leadership across the board. I mean, you've worked with everything from Fortune 500 companies to the startups, and the core of really the core of your work is the program Leader Step 7.
The actual skill, the communication skill that we talk about in sales and leadership and everything, there's one skill that's the most important skill in sales and in leadership. You know what that skill is?
Listening.
That's what everybody says, and it's wrong.
Okay.
It's questioning.
Great questions. Yes.
Great questions.
Yes.
Unfinished Business Podcast Show with your host, David Sliman.
Yeah, and you played a long time, huh? Played tennis for a long time?
I did. I played 1 year of high school tennis, and I was a soccer player, and was actually going to play soccer at the University of Connecticut. But I fell in love with tennis my senior year of high school, and I was just like, I got to play tennis.
Yeah, play tennis, yeah.
So yeah, went out for the team, and the first year, I was really bad. I mean, I never had a lesson. I played for 1 year. Walk out on the college courts, talk to the coach. Oh, coach, I want to play. And he goes, okay, let's see what you got. So he puts me on the court with like their number 6 or number 7 guy. And I probably win half a game. I didn't win anything, right? So he goes, okay. So I come back the next day. He's like, coach, put me in, right? And he goes, all right, you go back in the back court there. I'll send somebody out to play with you. And he did it every day. He let me play. Now I was bad. I mean, they had the top 6 were varsity. The next 6 were junior varsity. That's 12. Okay. The next 3 were alternates. I was on an others list. He would look at the list and go on the back court. We'll hit some balls, right? Made junior varsity in my sophomore year. I made varsity in my junior year. And actually had 2 college letters from the University of Connecticut for tennis. So
wow.
I wasn't very good, but I could run, man. I played soccer and I could run.
That's great. That's in that sport, you got to be quick, man. And we were just talking, and listen, everybody, we just started. I started recording this because these are the best conversations. Like when we're just chatting and it's not so questioned and layered in. But Dr. Gary here, you had a hip replacement. How long ago? 12 months ago?
13 months ago.
13 months ago.
Valentine's Day last year. Yeah.
And he's back on the court.
Yep.
He's back on the court.
And getting ready to play competitively. I'm playing in a North Carolina team event in a few weeks. And then I'll start playing nationally again, probably in July.
I love it. There's nothing like competing, right? Like I was a college athlete myself, and just any opportunity I have to compete, whether even if it's with my kid out in the basketball court or something like that, there's just nothing like competing.
Yeah, and it's competing within boundaries, right?
Right.
Because I can remember having a doubles partner once who was competing with me on the doubles court when we were playing together. And I've said this in leadership many, many times, competition within a team. If you have a common goal that you're working towards, competition within a team is always destructive. Always. Because it creates, there's an emotion about it. There's an expectation, and just competition is great. It drives us to do things, but the competition has to be focused in an area that makes sense, that you don't have a common goal. So I'll give you an example. I was a VP of sales and marketing at a bunch of different companies, right? Yeah. Well, the sales team, I said, you don't have a sales team. I said, what's the common goal for the sales team? Well, overall revenue. Yeah, but what do they get compensated on? They get compensated on individual revenue or gross profit contribution to the company. Okay. Yeah. So if you and I are on the same team, we may, out of the goodness of our hearts, help each other out. But the fact of the matter is that I'm competing against the goal, and I'm going to do what I can to achieve that goal. And if you need my help on my team, but it gets in the way of me achieving my goal in sales, sorry, love you, mean it, but gotta go.
Gotta go. Yep.
Right?
Gotta go.
In operations, in other areas of business, their goals are codependent. they're depending on each other to get things done. So the focus there needs to be within the team. So, but what I tell people is this: within an organization, whether it's sales and marketing and getting along with operations and all this stuff, then the cooperation within that team has to be focused on the competition out in the marketplace, not within the confines of the building, right? So.
Yes. Now, and listen, if you haven't guessed it, everybody, we're going to talk about leadership today, building great organizations, and it's a mindset. Leadership is a mindset. I always say this: a leader is not somebody who stands in front of the room. And our guest today, Dr. Gary McGrath, is a true developer in this space. And your company is Statarius, correct?
That's Statarius. I wore my Statarius shirt today. Here it is. There we go. All right. It's Latin. Okay. As I always say to people, you don't know your Latin? All right. So Latin is to stand firm or to be balanced. Started in 2009 after I got my doctorate at age 55 years old. And started this company, been in it for 16 years and just loving it. We're developing leaders and influence thousands and thousands of people. And to your point, what you just said is, leadership is a responsibility, not a position.
Yeah,
that's the way we say it. It's a responsibility, not a position. And people forget that. They think, well, I don't have the management title, or I don't have this title, or you have influence. You have a voice. Learn. If you can't convince people that your idea is the best idea, then maybe the problem is that you haven't developed the skill of influencing, the skill of emotional intelligence and connection, the skill of listening to the other person's needs, desires, and wants, so that you can fit that into what you're trying to achieve, and then communicate that in a way that influences them towards the ideas that you have. I'm a consultant in a company. I have no power, none, zero. Okay. And yet my average stay at a company is 7 to 10 years.
Wow.
I have a client right now that just signed up for their first leadership program after I've worked with them for 12 years.
Wow.
I've gone through 3 CEOs, 2 chairmen of the board, finally got a CEO that says, let's do leadership, right? So I was consulting and so on with them before, and I added value. But now we're going to do a leadership program with their executives and their middle managers, and it's going to be great.
That's great. That's great. I can't wait to dive into this conversation because, your leadership across the board. I mean, you've worked with everything from Fortune 500 companies to the startups, and the core of your really the core of your work is the program Leader Step 7. Correct? That's
yes. Yep.
So I want to talk about the stages of that and really everything that is developed around that approach, and obviously your story as well. But you often talk about transforming, I love this, good bosses into great leaders, right? Gosh, yeah. In your view, I see some already in my head, but I want to hear from you. In your view, what are the key differences between the two, good bosses and great leaders?
Well, it's a matter of extent and breadth of influence. Okay. So good bosses, let me back up for a second, David, yes. Because when I go to networking meetings and people say, oh, what do you do? And people they jump into, well, I'm a podcast host, or I do leadership consultant. And I'm like, no, that's not what you do. Okay. Let me tell you what I do. I ask people, you ever had a bad boss? And according to statistics, 71% of employees have had an intolerable boss. Not just a bad boss, but an intolerable boss. Okay. 71%. Okay. So their immediate answer is always yes. And then they say, well, what do you do? Well, I get rid of them. And they're like, oh, what are you, a corporate assassin? I'm like, no, I'm a leadership developer. Because you see, leaders, most of them, okay, are not bad bosses because they want to be bad bosses. They don't wake up in the morning and say, I want to be a bad boss today. I want to make David's life miserable. Now, there are some people like that, but I'm not going to go into that because those I can't help. but most of them just don't know. They don't know how to do what they're supposed to do. And in fact, let's think about this. We always talk about being a parent. David, you a parent?
Yes.
Yes. Did you get the parenting document, the training manual for that when you became a parent?
There's no training manual for that one.
There's no training manual, right? So we talk about this all the time. There are better ways to develop leadership as a parent. And I talk about parenting being the most important leadership position you will ever have, because you influence the entire life of this little human being that will hopefully grow up to be a contributing adult. When I was growing up, my dad was a military officer, born in 1929. Okay. One good thing about my dad is I always knew he loved us. One bad thing about my dad is his leadership style as a parent was corporal punishment. There was no conversation. You just got hit.
Yeah.
Okay? Don't do that. Whack. I can still feel the spoon on the top of my head for forgetting to say thank you when I said pass the salt. It's pass the salt, please. Whack. Okay. So you don't forget, right? Is it effective? Well, actually, no. All kinds of studies show that what I'm going to do is I'm going to sit far enough away from him to prevent the hit if I forget. And then in the time frame it takes for him to get closer to me, oh, please, 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 please. I remember now. Okay. So your corporal punishment prevents the person from the pain. You try to find a way to prevent the pain. All right. So when my sons were growing up, my wife and I made a pact. I was not going to grow up with my kids the same way. And we had the conversations about that. I'm not going to hit my kids. I'm not going to have corporal punishment. Okay. So, my son's 2.5 years old and he was being a real pain in the butt and he wouldn't pick up his toys. He wouldn't do this. Whack. And I hit him on the butt. Right. Didn't really hurt him, but I scared him. Right.
Yeah.
My wife walks into the living room and she goes, what's going on in here? Well, Chris over there wouldn't do what I tell him to do. He was talking back to me and I whacked him on the butt. Okay. I thought we said we weren't going to do that. Well, yeah, but he needs to do what I tell him to do. I'm defending myself, right? And my wife says, okay, we have other options. Yeah, we have other options. Like what? Well, she happened to be a counselor and she gave me like 10. Okay? You can give him a timeout. You can help him clean up the things himself. You can, tell him to be quiet for 5 minutes. You can, she goes down this list.
Right.
But I'm not going to give it up, David. No way, baby. I'm like, well, if I do all that, can I hit him then? She goes, look, if you do all that and he still won't do what you asked him to do, go for it. Okay. So I never hit my sons again. All right. And that has changed the relationship that I have with my sons. I had a good relationship with my dad. Okay. But I got to tell you something. I never called my dad up and said, hey, Dad, you want to go and hang out in Las Vegas for a week? And that's what my sons do.
Yes.
That's the difference.
So true, man. That is one thing my wife and I say is that, one of the things of the definers of being like a great parent, and I wouldn't say great, but you've done things right. You've done most of them right, is when your kids, like our daughter, who's 25, calls up and wants to hang out. They want to spend, right?
It's like there's nothing like it.
Yes. I think my wife said that too. We were just in Phoenix this past weekend, and my daughter's there, and just seeing them all the time and spending that time. Yeah, she said. I think she said that actually this weekend, which is so true, right?
Yeah. So let's take that into that same idea into leadership. So you talked about making bad bosses into good bosses, and what does that take? Well, first of all, you started off by saying it takes a mindset. All right, it takes a different mindset. I had to create a different mindset as a parent that was going to use alternatives to corporal punishment, which is what I was brought up with. My wife held me accountable to that. Okay. So there was somebody that I was respected in my life that held me accountable to her. Even though I said I wasn't going to do it, I still did it because that's what I knew. When she trained me, taught me, worked with me, supported me, didn't yell at me, showed me love and said, let's do this. It's like, yeah, because that's the relationship I wanted to have in my mind. As I learned from Stephen Covey in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I worked for him for 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
Begin with the end in mind. What's the end in mind? The end in mind is when they're 25 to 30 years old, they're going to call us up and say, do you want to hang out?
Yes.
Are they going to do that when they're 6 and you're hitting them? Are they doing that when you're abusing them, or you're not paying any attention to them? You're not listening to them. You're not spending any time with them. No.
Yeah.
Okay. This is not complicated. Okay. But it requires a different mindset. Okay. So we start with that with good bosses. We say, look, I want to make bad bosses into good bosses. First of all, do you believe that leadership is natural, has natural talents, or is it something you can learn? It's something you can learn.
You learn for sure.
Great leaders is a combination of talent and education, training, experience. Not everybody can be a great leader, okay? But everybody can demonstrate leadership capabilities in given situations with people that they're around. And you do that with skill. You do that. I learned this at Procter & Gamble. When I came out of the Army, I went to work for Procter & Gamble. Why Procter & Gamble? Because they had a great training program, and I needed to kind of deprogram myself from the directing, command, and control Army training that I had and learn a different style. So I went to Procter & Gamble because they did all that. I can remember my boss walked in one day. I'd been there about 6 or 8 months, and he hands me 2 pieces of paper, and he says, you see these pieces of paper? There's 13 steps to giving and receiving feedback. I want you to do a workshop on this next month. I'm like, a workshop? I don't know how to do a workshop. He said, yeah, we'll figure it out. Okay. I can still remember most of those 13 steps today. And that was 50 years ago, or something. And it's things like that you throw people into, that skills development that requires us to think and apply. And that's the thing with our Leadership 7 programs. We have 3 levels in our leadership programs.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Because I want to dig into Leadership 7. Yes.
First level managers to managers, vice presidents, up all the way up to presidents. Okay. So we have 3 levels. At the executive level, it's strategic initiatives and working through skills. In the middle level, it's a lot of skills and assessments and so on. All of the programs have exactly the same process. The process never changes. Why do we have this process that includes selecting the right people, assessing certain areas like emotional intelligence, decision-making, which, by the way, emotional intelligence and decision-making judgment are the only 2 scientifically measurable and correlated characteristics of leadership effectiveness.
Okay.
Everything else is anecdotal. All this stuff about cultural fit, personality styles, behavioral tendencies, it's all great stuff. Don't get me wrong. It's great stuff to learn and communicate better, but emotional intelligence and decision-making judgment are directly correlated to effective leadership. All right, so we measure those.
Well, you started with, I want to start though, because you started with selecting the right people.
That's right.
Right? Like,
yeah.
That's because you go through this interview process. I call it speed dating. Okay. Because I mean, usually when people are trying to fill a role, they're filling it for a reason. They have a need. The person who wants the job has a need, and everyone's putting their best foot forward. And then they get into the position, and all of a sudden it's like, wait a second, who did I hire? Or what company did I just sign up for? Right.
Yeah.
Talk to me about some clarity. I'd like to unpack that a little bit. Clarity on finding the right people, if you got some insight to that.
Well, the biggest insight to it is finding out if they have a growth mindset. Okay. When I talk to an executive, I talk to CEOs. There's several CEOs that I've talked to that have wanted to hire me, and I won't work with them because they don't have. There's one value that I'm looking for, one single simple value that they have to have for my company to get involved with them. And that's humility. With humility or modestness, there is an amount of questioning their perfection. Okay. That I'm not perfect. I can still learn. Look, I just had a meeting with a brigadier general from Air Force, who's now the vice president of leadership and development for a local company here in Raleigh.
Okay.
And in 10 minutes, I love the guy. I mean, you just tell that the guy is like, I haven't learned it all. He's probably my age, he's 70 or 60 something. All right. I haven't learned it all, and I can learn from you. I mean, that's the attitude. If I'm going to work with a CEO, you've got to have that modesty. You've got to have that openness to be able to learn. When I talk to a CEO, and there's two things that I look for. Number one, are they willing to hear and listen? And I'll always try to figure out a way to add some value to what they're talking about, David, to see how they take it.
Yeah.
Right.
Gotcha.
Number one. Number two, if they're blaming all their problems on their staff, that's a problem.
Yes, that's a problem.
Yeah. Right.
Great.
So selection, as you say, within an organization, first of all, is I'm gonna go to the negative on this. We don't fix people.
Okay.
It's not about fixing people. It's about somebody that maybe is living up to their potential. And David, they go to you and they say, David, I want to do better, but I don't know how to do better. I try this and I try that, and it just doesn't seem to work, and I need help. Those are the people that we select. Where their baseline is irrelevant.
Yeah.
Okay. It's a mindset and a desire to be better.
Yes.
And we can coach and guide that for them to be better no matter where they are. Now, they might be at a supervisory level, and according to the principle, that's as high as they're going to go. All right? They're never going to go any higher. The biggest mistake that we make in selection for a new boss is because they were the best technical person in that department, best sales guy, best technical person, so on. And I'm going to tell you two things very quickly about that in selection. Number one, only 30% of the general population should ever be in a leadership or a management position. Only 30% that have the basic talents to build on decision-making judgment and emotional intelligence to be effective as a supervisor, manager, vice president, president. Okay. Now, if it's 30% and yet they misselect, according to Gallup, the right person to promote 84% of the time. Because it's about personality, and it's about who I like, and it's about who we get along with, and we look at this, and they're a great salesperson. Oh yeah, let's put them in charge of sales.
I've seen that 100%. Great sales. No. Yeah.
I mean, think about this. If I'm a great salesperson, what am I going to tell my team? Sell like I do.
Yep. Everybody thinks they're them. Everybody thinks they're them.
You got to sell like I do, because look how successful I was. Do it my way. And yet people have different talents, different approaches, different ways of going about things. Not good. All right. Not only that, but they'll basically shove it down people's throats. What I've often said is look for the person that has high emotional intelligence, good judgment, that's mediocre in sales. Put them in charge. Okay. And everybody's going to say, why'd you put Gary in charge? He wasn't that good a salesperson. Well, let's see. And Gary gets together with the team and goes, I don't really know why they put me in charge here, guys, but how do you want to do this? Okay.
Yeah.
That's how they start.
Love that.
How do you want to do this?
Perspective.
What can I do to help you? All right. Which is what the job of the manager is supposed to be. Okay. Out of almost forced humility, they will just ask that question. Okay. And the most important skill of a leader, all right, the most important skill of a leader is being a coach. All right. Now, I say this, and the actual skill, the communication skill that we talk about in sales and leadership and everything, there's one skill that's the most important skill in sales and in leadership. You know what that skill is?
Listening.
That's what everybody says, and it's wrong. Okay. It's questioning.
Great questions. Yes.
Great questions.
Yes.
Now, listening is important. Don't get me wrong, but it's a combination of questioning and listening. What does a great coach learn? A great coach learns how to question and listen. All right. And help people solve their own problems. And then as the boss, sometimes you step in and you help where needed, but you never, ever do for others what they can do for themselves, because when you do, you're demeaning them.
Yeah.
You're saying you're not good enough.
Right. And then the shutdown, right?
That's right.
Yes.
That's right.
Yep.
Yeah. So to your point, the selection is looking for people with high emotional intelligence, okay, or developing emotional intelligence, and they, with good decision-making judgment, that have a mindset of humility and a mindset of growth.
Yeah.
I get those people. I want to select them. I want them in the program.
So Gary, this is interesting because it all comes around this thing that I've really been in tune with over the last couple of years. And again, I'm not patting myself on the back. It was just something I had innately, but I kind of recognized it probably over the last 5 years, actually. But the thing that separates really good leaders from me between great leaders, and there's a number of things, but one thing that stuck out to me is self-awareness. Like there's some people who I know that are pretty successful and their self-awareness is in the can. And I'm like, how? Like, and I'm not saying that they're not good at what they do, but it's amazing to me how many people out there who are successful have that common trait of the self-awareness brand, or DNA, I should say, the self-awareness DNA. How important is that? That is.
So you make a really good point, because the model that we use by Daniel Goleman's emotional intelligence model, and we use others too, but we primarily focus on Daniel Goleman's model. And the first part of the 4 parts of emotional intelligence is self-awareness.
Yes.
Okay. Now there's 2 parts to this. All right. So let's unpack this a little bit. Self-awareness. Number 1, most of us have a horrible vocabulary for understanding what feelings I'm feeling. Okay. And we always joke about it. Guys say, "Oh, how do you feel?" "I'm great. I'm good. I'm good. I'm great. I'm good." Or, "I'm pissed. I'm just pissed." "How are you?" I'm neutral. What are you feeling?" Nothing. Okay. That's it. That's the spectrum. All right. I'm either angry, happy, or neutral. All right. Great. So, and any version of that. All right. So, and then we're talking to women who says, "Oh, I'm really frustrated. These people are irritating and agitating me." And they use 14 different words to be able to explain their vocabulary of emotions. So let's think about this. If I can't describe the emotion that I'm feeling at any given time, how do I connect with someone emotionally? Because as a human being, we connect in multiple levels in multiple ways, right? So you and I can talk, and I went to the University of Connecticut, UConn Huskies basketball. We love it. Yeah. And you say, "Yeah, so did I." Or where'd you go to school?
Yeah. Heidelberg University. Yep.
Heidelberg. Yeah. Well, I don't know who the hell they are. But anyway, okay. So that's all right. That's okay. We find something that we can connect on. I play tennis, or we play golf. Let's go play golf. We'll find some superficial thing, okay, that I might say I grew up a lot of time in Connecticut. "Oh, I've been to Connecticut. It's a beautiful state." We try to find some way to connect on an experience, right? That's a very superficial level. Right?
Yes.
Deep connection occurs through emotional connection, okay, and usually through hard work on accomplishing something together emotionally. All right. Yeah. So that's the deepest connection. And that's why in the military, we talk about, my Army buddies are not employees. They're brothers and sisters.
Yeah.
Because we're in a situation where we have to have each other's back. This is life and death. Okay. This is not screwing around. All right. You talk about the firefighters, police officers, FBI. They're brothers and sisters.
Yes.
Okay. They work together to try to achieve the mission that's in front of them. All right. Where is that in business? It's not.
It's not. You're right. That there's a huge lack of that.
And the reason is because we don't establish an understanding of what connects people, and what connects them as a combination of accomplishment and emotional connection. Those teams don't build trust through workshops. Okay? They build trust through accomplishment in difficult situations. And then they trust each other. And then they get to a point where they feel so strongly about their teammates, would never let them down. Never.
Yeah.
Okay? So our leadership, we have a 3.5-day leadership boot camp, and we do Leadership 7. Okay. Every single one has a boot camp. And there's things that we do in that boot camp to create stress, pressure, and accomplishment within the teams that are winning. So my favorite number is 16. We have a 16-person group. They're broken into 4 teams of 4. We have them do things together as teams as they go through it. Okay. From the very first day, they have to do, and I'm not going to get into the details of what we do, but they're required to accomplish something. And it starts to pull them together. And the next day they've got to do something and that pulls them together. And the next day they do something and that pulls them together. And then through the whole 8 or 9 months, they have to work together. They meet every month. They support each other. They work together. Now, there's a philosophy and a psychological reason behind all of this stuff that we do in the program. We have people that we trained and developed 6, 7, 8 years ago that are still meeting today. They still meet today. Okay. They don't have interdependent goals, but they developed a friendship and a trust in each other where if they have a problem, hey, Dave, man, I need some help. Can you, you got 20 minutes to listen to my BS and tell you what's going on? And you go, absolutely.
Yeah.
Right. Because here's the thing with leadership. We want to develop these leaders, but we want real behavioral change. It's like, how do we do that? Well, it's not easy. And in fact, training by itself is a waste of money. It's been proven over and over and over again. It's a waste of money. That's why we don't train leaders, we develop leaders. Okay. Everything that we do is over time. The one thing that we will do that is over time that doesn't involve a whole lot of people is we'll do individual coaching. But in that individual coaching, guess what? We do assessments. We talk about their goals. We talk about holistically what they need to do in order to be able to be effective. And my second book, The 7 Steps of Intentional Leadership, the first step is purpose. Within that first step, there's 3 components. And that first component is the one thing every leader has to have in order to hold him or herself accountable as a leader so that they show up well every single day.
So good. That's so good. I want to go back to what you said earlier because it just stuck something in my head. When I was an athlete, my head football coach in high school used to say, listen, do you know how steel is made? And at that time, no, I don't know, constant heat, constant pressure at high volume. That's how steel is made. And I'm not saying you go into your team and start putting a bunch of pressure on them and break this thing in it. No. But what I'm saying is, like, one thing that I love about your strategy is that you're I wouldn't say spoon feeding, but yeah, you're sort of going day by day, win by win, process by process, and ultimately building that heat and that compression to have that steel made. And that's how you want your teams are. I mean, they are a foundation of your business, whether it's not a building, but those people who are in your business are the foundational elements or what it's going to make. They consider them, creating them to be steel. And that's always something that stuck with me. And I love your approach on it because that's essentially what you're doing. You're putting heat and pressure over time to build a stronger team. And that builds.
But it's soft pressure.
Yes. Right. It's not like hammer pressure. It's
not, because here, let me tell you what we do, because these studies that people come out of training, I got these 10 things I want to work on. I want to do this. Yeah, you're not going to do any of them. Okay. So we have this thing. We actually show a video of City Slickers. And during City Slickers, Curly is sitting there talking to the guy, Billy Crystal. And he says, you got to learn the one thing. And Billy's like, well, what's the one thing? He says, you have to figure that out. Okay. So we show that video. And at a point where we say, okay, we want you to open up your journal, because people write journals. We have a book that they write in during the whole training, right? So I want you to write, you've been sitting here now for a couple of hours, and we've talked about a bunch of different principles and so on. And some of you are taking notes. I want you to put an asterisk against the one thing that you think is the most important thing that you've learned so far. And they'll open their books, one thing. Okay, great. Because at the end of the day, we're going to ask you to pick one thing to work on, one thing. And at the end of the 3.5 days, you know what we're going to do? We're going to ask you to work on one thing. And we want you to pick that one thing. Now, you've got 30 things that you've learned in 3.5 days. One thing.
Just one.
One thing. Okay? And I'm going to give you an example of the kind of things that happens, okay? So we had one of the guys, department head, goes through this program, and he decides, I'm going to listen. I really wasn't doing a good job listening to my wife, to my kids, to my fellow employees. I'm going to listen. So a few months goes by, And this was his final story at the end of the program. They all have to stand up in front of everybody and say, this was the one thing that was most important to me during the program and what I learned. And there's a lot of tears sometimes with this stuff. He gets up there and he says, I have to tell you, we went to my 5-year-old's kindergarten teacher parent conference last week. Okay. And we walk in and we sit down. We're kind of worried. Because our daughter's a little verbose. Okay. She talks a lot. She's very active, like a lot of kids, right?
Yeah.
And of course, parents, they worry about this stuff as if a kindergarten teacher has never seen this before, right? Worry about stuff. So they go in and, so how's little Sarah doing? And the teacher says to them, so I have a question for you. And they're like, okay, what's the question? He says, how did you teach Sarah to listen so well? And they're like, we didn't. And it says, well, she does a really good job listening. When I ask her to do something, she does it. She helping other kids and so on. And they're like, that's not the daughter we know, as we have experienced this with kids, right? And the teacher says to her, well, I want you to know that I was so impressed by it, I asked Sarah. And Sarah said, I've been watching the way my dad listens to my mom.
Oh, wow.
That's the kind of stuff that we do.
Great.
Yeah.
Love that. What a great story.
And it's one thing, okay? And you say, how do we develop, how do we, we select and we assess, we do all this, because it's building blocks. It's little tiny things.
Yeah.
Right? It's behaviors that you become part of your toolbox. So right? I use that listening. I use that questioning. I use my emotional intelligence. I become more self-aware. When I'm self-aware and I understand the emotions that I'm feeling, I can then see in somebody else a similar emotion. I can look at your face, and at times there's been, 3 or 4 times that you and I have been talking. You get this big smile on your face. You go, yeah, that's it. And you get that emotion, and I can say, you're really feeling a sense of satisfaction. You love doing these podcasts, don't you? You get a lot of excitement on you. Yeah, this is great. We can connect emotionally, but if I'm unaware of my own emotions, it's very difficult for me to express the emotions that I see in others, because I don't even see it myself. Yeah. But the connection is an emotional connection.
Yeah, it draws it out. It's great stuff. Listen, we're going to keep going here, okay? Because this has been a fantastic discussion. I have thoroughly enjoyed this, and I know our listeners have. But we could go on this thing for 2 hours if we wanted. But
we could.
Fantastic. One of the things you said, you used a word earlier. Hey, accountability, and one of your pillars is compassionate accountability. Unpack that phrase and why it's so essential today for leaders. And again, I want to use this word loosely, not loosely, but the word leader. It's not somebody in front of the room. It could be someone in an operations team just making something happen. Okay. I mean, there's always leaders within. I always say that when I'm working with organizations, be a leader within. But I really want to focus on that word compassionate accountability.
So I'm going to go to parenting again.
Okay.
You've heard the phrase, tough love.
Tough love.
Tough love. And a lot of times in business, we don't want to hear the word love, and it sometimes some people it turns it off. So let's unpack this in a way that people understand by talking about the 2 types of respect: personal and professional. Personal respect is owed to you as a human being. You're on this earth, whatever your background or beliefs or experiences are. I owe you human respect. Treat you with politeness, with courtesy, okay? Show some grace, right? And then there's professional respect. Professional respect is earned. It's earned through the contract that we have based on an employment, that you have a job, you have responsibilities, you have goals you're trying to achieve. because you're getting paid to do that. So there's a professional respect. Now, if I'm your boss, I'm going to hold you accountable to achievement of those goals respectfully, okay? Up to and including the point where I either coach you up or coach you out. By coaching you up, you get to a point where you're delivering the goals, the expectations, the outputs that are needed to earn professional respect. In that process, I will always, always, always show personal respect.
Yeah.
Okay. And the compassionate part, I found in my 30 plus years of business, opportunities to demonstrate understanding and compassion to people to build loyalty. Okay. Because especially when people are down and out, that's when they need the most compassion.
Yes.
All right. So I'm gonna give you another example of this because it's so powerful. When I do emotional intelligence training, we talk about self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship management, all of these complicated things. As I'm going to give you the first self-management, one thing, the behavior for you to follow as a leader. So you're in a tough situation and you simply say, David, I got a call from the customer today. They're not happy. What's going on? And shut up. Okay? Just shut up. All right. So, when you get connected to outcomes and you get upset and everything, I know we've done a lot of work in the construction world for 15, 16 years, and they have a reputation for this stuff and going off the handle, and just ask the question and shut up. So I'm teaching this class. I get a call from this branch manager.
Okay.
They're about a $10 million branch. They have a $2 million job going on, and it's going sideways. His best project manager's on it. But after a couple of weeks, it's getting worse and worse. Customers calling, complaining. He's on the phone with them, and the customer's just, you need to fix this. So he calls Bob in, and he sits him down. He says, Bob, customer's not happy. What's going on? Okay. Well, Bob, who was a very, very good project manager up until then, slumps in his chair, and he says, I'm really sorry. I've been trying. I know how important this job is. I've been trying to pull it together, but my brother died 2 weeks ago. I've been trying to help his family out. I am not in a good place right now, and I should have asked for help, but I know how important this is, and I was just trying to hold it together. Okay. The general manager said, oh, we got your back. Okay.
Yeah.
He had been through our training. All right. This is where this is so obvious to show compassion. But here's the thing, is that general manager that called me and told me this story, he said, a year ago, I would have fired him. I just would have brought him in. It's going to hell. You're out. You're fired. Let's get on with it and go on to the next thing. He says, we told him, go home, go take care of your brother, go your brother's family, go take care of this. What else do you need? He called in other people. They got things organized. They got things settled. He came back like a couple of weeks later, went back on the job, and he was still there for the last time I talked to him 8 or 9 years later. He's a good man. He's a good person. People don't screw up on purpose most of the time.
Right. This is great because I really want to dig into this a little bit more. I mean, how do you get leaders to stay grounded in empathy? Because you've been in sales, right? You've been a senior VP of sales. They got to push the numbers up. You got to get profitable, whatever the scenario is. But how do you help them stay grounded in empathy while driving sales performance or even results for the organization, depending on what it is?
Focus on the process, not the outcome.
Oh, I love it. Love that.
Focus on the process. What are you doing every day? Okay. What's the one thing? All right. So it's like each day, are you making the calls? You're in sales. Are you making the calls? You're setting up the appointments. You're talking to the right people. You're qualifying the right buyers. It's what's your strategy, and taking that down to what am I doing today? Okay. And every sales organization I ever had, I was able to grow sales dramatically in a short period of time with the same team that was there before. All right. And it was simply working on the process and teaching skills at the same time. When I came here and took over a technology company, sales went from 50 to 33 million over a 4-year period. It was during the dot-com bust and all this kind of stuff back in 2000, 2001. And they were going down, and they had fired their 5 sales managers, leaders before them, and I came in. And in 30 days, we figured out what our challenges were, and we started doing training. All right. We started doing spin selling training and emotional intelligence and other things. So we started doing all this stuff, right? Once a month, I'd bring the whole sales team in for half a day, and we would do training, and then we'd have some fun. We'd go out and have a few drinks and, enjoy. Yeah. And then one day, in my first book, Mastering Sales Leadership, Learning to Herd Cats, I tell this story about the volunteer. I call him the volunteer.
Okay.
So volunteer walks in my office and he says, I don't need these half day. You're pulling me out of the field and not letting me do my sales stuff. And he's starting to kind of yell at me and complain. Yeah. I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah. I don't need to read these books. I'm a sales professional. I'm 34 years old. I know what the hell I'm doing. Okay. That's terrific. Here, let's take a look at these numbers and where you were and where you are and what you're at. You're not doing so well.
Yeah.
And I said, and you don't want to read the book? No. I said, you're great. Let's go get all the stuff out of your office. You're fired.
Yeah.
And I fired him on the spot. He didn't have a growth mindset, not interested. And I walked him out, right? And in the past in this company, they were all very, clandestine with their firings. No. I walked him right out in front of everybody. Okay. And then I walked back into the bullpen with all that. I got 14 outside salespeople, 7 inside salespeople, technical support people. I have an announcement to make. Mike over there has decided to join another team. Something about not wanting to read the books and be part of the process and be part of this team. That's fine.
Yeah.
By the way, for next week's meeting, I suggest you read the book. And I walk in and get in my office. I didn't fire anybody else.
No,
and they
have to.
The numbers went way up.
Yeah.
I mean, I can tell you all kinds of stories.
You said something earlier, and I have a different way of saying it, but it's very aligned, right?
Yeah.
Goals versus commitments, okay? Because essentially goals are what? They're results. That's all they are.
Yeah.
Goals are just results. But you cannot, once you've set the goal, you set it, and then you forget it. What you've really got to focus on are the commitments. And this is what you said, the things day in and day out you need to do in order to achieve the result, because it's all those things that really lead up to the end result anyway. But if you can identify those, know where to put pressure when it's going well, know where to put pressure when it's not going well, then you can have a much clearer path on identifying or getting to the results you want to achieve. But essentially it's the same thing. And I the way you started that out was perfect. I mean, that is just
focus on the process, not the outcome.
Yeah, it's the process, right?
So I was with another, when I was a director of sales for another IT company before that, I had a saleswoman who was fabulous. I mean, she just hard worker, filling the pipeline. She had a huge pipeline. Everything was right there, frustrated because she was going into the fourth quarter at about 33% of quota. And people were, I think we need to fire. I'm like, have you seen this pipeline? I mean, have you seen? So I said, I'll tell you what, I'll make an assessment. So I went out with her for 2 or 3 days, and we went out and met prospects, and they all basically said the same thing. It's just, it's budgets, it's this, it's that, but we want to do business with her. I mean, she's great. We want to do business with you guys, so they're making a verbal commitment. I said, that's great. So I went back and I said, I'm not getting rid of her. Her pipeline is huge. She was doing everything that you needed to do, and it was just circumstantial. No salesperson can make somebody buy. Okay, they can't make them buy. They can only convince them and influence them to buy the service. So on about December, checks started to come in. I mean, contracts are coming in. This is just common, right? And because we're on a cash basis, I said to her, you know what your job is the next 2 weeks? She goes, no. I said, go collect money. And she did. And she hit 108% of quota.
That is such a great point because, and I think in any sales business, and really the trend hasn't changed, but the ability to give people professionals time, especially in the sales world, because everybody's, well, you've been in sales, right? And there's this factor where you got to understand they may have skills, but they've got to have the knowledge of the industry and the business sometimes, especially if they're switching. So what comes with that is work ethic. And as long as there's engagement, there's questions, you've got a clear understanding of their pipeline, you can feel that. I've seen some companies people like you stepped in this case, could have let go of a good sales professional, but you just got to have time. You got to be patient, and really having a pulse on your team is the key to this, right? Like with the training and the coaching and the mentoring, and that really develops the cohesive strategy, which is everything that you employ on your leadership. And I think it's a fantastic approach and takes a lot of the guesswork out of it.
It does. And you've touched upon a lot of principles on this, right? First principle is they have to have the skill, right? They have to have the industry knowledge and the sales questioning skills, okay? Not necessarily presentation skills, but questioning skills to drive the conversation down a path that gets the person to see how much pain they're in, and that you're the solution to their pain.
Those challenges, yep.
Right? So I'm not a leadership consultant. I don't sell that. You got bad bosses in your organization? I make them into good bosses. You interested in that? We can talk. Okay? That's the value that I bring. Being a consultant is not a value. It's a label. So in sales, we look at the same thing. So we say, okay, I've got the skill. I've got a strategy. I know who my ideal customers are, all right? Who the buyers are. And I know who the targets are, and who in those targets has money, has budget, okay? And then in the strategy and the right buyer, a process. What's my process for getting in front of them, okay? And you know the best salespeople are just really creative with that. I got to tell you this one story. I said, "What's the best thing you ever did to get into a potential buyer's office?" He said, "Well, I was selling to CIOs and to this big company and the CIO, and I found that he played golf. So I thought, okay." I started digging around, and I show up when he wasn't there, and I talked to his assistant, and I found out his shoe size. I bought him these really expensive, brand new golf shoes, okay? And I found out what his breakfast preference was. So I bought him breakfast and the golf shoes. And I put the golf shoes outside of his office with breakfast on top of it and a note saying, "Please give me a call for when we can have the meeting, and I'll give you the other shoe."
I love it. I love it.
So he got the meeting.
You got the meeting? You got the meeting. For sure he did.
Yeah.
That's great.
And that's creative. And that
is creative.
But you also said one other thing that is absolutely necessary from the beginning. Nothing else matters if you don't work hard.
That's it.
You got to work hard.
Yeah. You got to put yourself in situations, right? You got to work hard, put yourself in situations that you got to learn from. And that's how you develop skill and knowledge. It's not by reading a book. And I'm not saying you can't pull things out from a book or a podcast or anything, but really where the rubber meets the road is when you're working and you're putting action out there and you're putting yourself in, when you're at the plate, when you're at bat and you actually get real swings, like that's it.
Yeah. But how long does it take you to get excellent at that? I mean, let's think about this to your point.
Yeah.
I tell you what we're going to do, David. I want you to watch Roger Federer, and I want you to watch exactly how he hits it. I'm going to give you the book, tennis, and you're going to learn this, and then we're going to go out and play tennis. And now that you know how to do it, baby, you're going to beat me, right? There is no chance.
You got to get reps. Practice.
No chance in the world. And it's the same thing. What you're saying is you got to get the reps in front of people and struggle. People, it's like, I don't know if no. There's learning in the struggle. It's okay. Go out and fail. Increase the number of failures, and you're going to learn from these things. Now, if you're not learning from these things, you probably need to go into operations.
Yeah, that's a true failure, right? If you make a mistake and you don't learn from it, that's what I call true failure.
Yes, good one. Yes.
Yeah, so
you're
true.
failing twice then, right?
Yeah, exactly. This, Dr. Gary, this has been a great interview. I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed this podcast. And I got one more question for you. If a business owner is listening right now and could only start one of your 7 leader steps,
Yep.
which one would you tell them to focus on first?
Well, we're going to go to step 1, item 1.
Okay.
And I ask people all the time, and I said this earlier, I'm glad you come back to it. What's the one thing a leader has to have to hold themselves accountable? And I honestly, I haven't, in all the years that I've done this, I think I've had one person give me the right answer. Thousands and thousands of people haven't gotten the right answer. And here's the answer. You need to have a personal, written mission statement. You write a personal mission statement. I learned this from Stephen Covey back in the 90s when I worked for the Covey Leadership Center. Begin with the end in mind. When I retire or when I pass away, what do I want people to be saying about me? The first thing that we do on the first day of our leadership boot camp is have people self-assess, think about their lives, think about their families, think about their employees, their work life, think about their health, think about their spiritual wellness, think about their mental wellness, and sit down and write a personal mission statement that helps them drive their daily thoughts and behaviors and hold themselves accountable. And we tell people we want you to read that at least once a week. Keep it in front of you and read it and see what it says. And I just finished an executive leadership program a few weeks ago, and it took this one executive almost 6 months to finish his statement. Okay. And I'm coaching him. He's the president of about a $400 million company. And I'm working with him and he's got all this stuff. And I'm like, Jim, it's really great. I can see that this really resonates with you and so on. I just got one observation. And he says, oh, what's that? I said, well, in all of our conversations, you've mentioned that you're a man of faith. And he says, yeah. I said, where's that in your mission statement? It's like, oh, yeah. So let's add that. What do you say? He goes, yeah, you're right. Okay.
I love it, man. I love it.
Little things like that. And that's what we get to do as leadership coaches to help guide people because, hey, in the day-to-day chaos, we forget what's most important.
Yeah.
And if we're going to demonstrate compassion and accountability, it's hard.
Yes.
But as the leader, we have to maintain emotional stability with those around us. We need to pick them up when they need to be picked up. We need to slow them down when they're going too fast. We need to observe and ask questions to get them solving their own problems. All of these skills are complex. Okay. It's easy. It's simple. It's not easy.
I will say that you constantly have to be self-aware and I still work on it. I mean, there are times where I get flustered, honestly. Yeah. I mean, we have it, right? We're human. We're wired that way. So I think it's, again, it's that self-awareness, and it comes back to a lot of stuff we talked about today.
I agree.
Dr. Gary, thank you for a great show. We're going to do this again. We're going to do it again. I really have enjoyed this, and I think it'd be absolutely a pleasure to have you back on the show in the future and talk more about this, because it resonates with not only people personally or professionally, but also personally, and it really does carry over. There's a lot of mesh between that. So I want to thank you for being here today.
Been my pleasure. Thanks, David.
Thank you. All right, everybody. Wealth, health, success to all of you out there. And like I always say, go get a win. I don't care how big, how small it is. Go get a win today. And Dr. Gary, thanks again for being here. We'll see you all next time.
Unfinished Business Podcast Show with your host, David Sliman.